Welcome. We have two guests again today, co-founders of Pillar Cowork in Lafayette, California, which I just checked on my Google Maps is only 43 minutes away with light middle of the day. I suspect it would climb during rush hour, but I have Amirh Davis and Christina Gutierrez with me. And they reminded me that we actually met in person at the GWA conference in Austin in, what did we decide, 2018? 2018.
Yeah.
And I need to get over and meet you in person. So I'm so excited to have this conversation. And I suspect many, many folks listening are very excited to hear some behind the scenes about what you're up to. So you have a co-working space and a childcare space. So lots of folks want to tackle that problem, but some are brave enough and some are not
crazy enough.
Or crazy, exactly. Brave enough and crazy enough. I think this is often the case with co-working, but more so with the childcare piece. It's like you feel this pain and you see what could be and how it could be better, and you just feel called to figure it out. So that's my hypothesis on what happened with both of you. But before we dive in and ask all the questions about your model, tell us about two of you, your backgrounds, your co-working story. Start with the how did Pillar come to be?
A co-working story, a beautiful story. Well, for me, I've been in the Bay for about 8 years. When I got here, I was still a stay-at-home mom. My son was, quite young, not in school. So I was familiar with co-working only through WeWork. And then once I sort of recognized that there wasn't really anything like for me, for moms who I had never entered the traditional workforce in any capacity. I went straight from college to being a mom. And so I started doing a little diving and came upon the wing. And then I went down the whole rabbit hole of all the different sort of niche offerings in terms of co-working. And I have a friend who's here who happens to be Amirh and I's mutual friend. And clearly we were both working on the same things and sharing it with this mutual friend. And Amirh and I had sort of ran into each other at different, group events over the years because of this friend. And eventually she's like, I think you guys need to just talk because you're kind of working on the same thing and also almost in the same location.
Okay.
That wouldn't make sense.
You shouldn't have two, right?
Exactly. We don't need to. Let's not double the trouble here. And so, we got together. We figured that what we were both working on made enough sense to figure it out, even though there were, things that were a little different. So that's how we started.
Christina, where did you move? Where did you live before the Bay Area?
Southern California. So I went to Cal State Northridge. Yep.
Okay.
And then we came up here. But I've been in California for, like 19 years.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm from Illinois.
Oh, you are? Where in Illinois?
Springfield.
Okay. California is.
Yes.
Better. I lived in Chicago for 15 years and I still miss it. Not in the winter, of course, but anyway. Amirh, tell us your side of the story.
Yeah, for me, it was because I needed a space like this, right? That was where my idea or the concept behind Pillar came about. I was working as a consultant when I had my first daughter. She's 9, so about 9 years ago, and I wasn't ready for her to go to childcare when it was time for me to go back to work. So I was, new mom exploring options, and I wanted her to be close to me. And I thought, oh, there must be a place, right, where I can work and someone can watch her. And I lived on the East Coast at the time, and it did not exist there. And so, I think that's just where the idea behind it came for me. And then as the years went on, I had another child or two, and I was still struggling with childcare, right? Like still trying to figure out how I could take care of the things that I needed to take care of, and then still have the children be taken care of in a way that like makes you feel comfortable, right? Because when you drop them off at childcare and you don't see them for 7-8 hours a day, there's just not that sense of security I think that a lot of parents are looking for. and we only can imagine what the children are experiencing, right? So yeah, and then like Christina said, when we met and we both had similar ideas around what we wanted to create, it took a little bit of time for us to decide like, okay, we can adjust our own ideas and come together. And I, you know, I think it's really like, if we weren't working together, I think we wouldn't be here today, right? Because
Agreed.
it was really just two different businesses that we're running at the same time. And I don't think that we really realized that, you know, we were creating
the co-working and the childcare.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't really overlap. Yes.
Right.
Because in our mind, we were like, well, the childcare is the differentiator, right? You always talk about like, what's your differentiator? What makes you, you know, so different from the other 55 co-working spaces?
Yeah.
And that's why. And I think, yeah.
It's like thinking of it more of an amenity versus
Exactly.
sort of a completely separate business model.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. We thought that was the approach we were going to take to begin with. Like, it was an ancillary service that we would offer people that were interested. However, when children are involved, I mean, everything has to, like, the children take priority. Hence why I have on a childcare apron right now, you know, because it's like, at the end of the day, that part of the business cannot run itself. Whereas on the co-working side, you have a little more flexibility around how you manage it and how you run it.
Right. And how independent your members can be in terms of making coffee and sort of managing their day.
Exactly.
So, okay, before we dive into the real details. So we discussed this on our pre-chat, March 2nd, 2020. So everybody listening is now giving you sympathy looks. These poor women.
You can cry together.
March 2nd, 2020. How many square feet is the space you're in, and how much is allocated to co-working and daycare?
So the space in total, mind you, it was an old bank. Just want to throw that out there. And it had a vault that we had to remove. Yeah. But the space itself is 5,000 square feet. I'd say roughly 3,900 is the co-working, and the remaining 1,100 is childcare.
Okay. And then on the co-working side, offices, dedicated desks, what does that look like?
So we have 6 proper offices, and I call them proper because I'd say 4 of them were a part of the initial construction, 2 were additional. But then we have a team that continued to grow, and basically they outgrew our largest office. And so we had this lovely space we called the multipurpose room that we were thinking like, oh, we can do small trainings, self-led meditation, some yoga. And they ended up taking over that space. So we don't have that anymore, but that's okay because it's a team of 10.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you want to include that, then I'd say 7 actual workspaces with doors.
Yep.
And then we have 6 dedicated desks, and the rest is mostly hot desk seating.
And then hot desks. And then do you own or lease the building?
Lease.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I suspect you mentioned before we started recording that it took 8 or 9 months to do construction. And I thought that's kind of a long time, but since you started with a bank, I'm guessing you had a lot of work to do. Banks are so interesting because they seem like such an opportunity, but structurally there's so much work to convert. Is that your experience?
That too, I think, in addition to just the aesthetic that we wanted to sort of, give people, I think that was one of the things we talked about is clearly it's not just for women, even though like that was my original thought, because I was thinking of what do I need as an individual. But I think we definitely wanted people to come in and for there to be a little bit more warmth than your average, co-working space, not so tech and bro-y to where, it could be off-putting for the person who doesn't really know what it is that they're trying to do. And they just want to feel like it's a safe space. And then in addition to that, we definitely had conversations around like, we have to make sure that the childcare and the co-working are completely separate. And so we lucked up because it has 2 entrances. So our main entrance on the street, which is Mount Diablo, the main through street in Lafayette, we have that door, and then we have a back ramp that leads directly into the childcare, which is nice because we actually have some families who will walk over in their stroller so they can bring the stroller up the ramp, park it in the back. Yeah, so that's a good thing. One of the silver linings.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in really quickly before we continue with our discussion. If you're working on opening a co-working space, I want to invite you to join me for my free masterclass, 3 behind-the-scenes secrets to opening a co-working space. If you're working on opening a co-working space, I want to share the 3 decisions that I've seen successful operators make when they're creating their co-working business. The masterclass is totally free. It's about an hour. It includes some Q&A. If you'd like to join me, you can register at everythingcoworking.com/masterclass. If you already have a co-working space, I want to make sure you know about Community Manager University. Community Manager University is a training and development platform for community managers, and it can be for owner operators. It has content, training, resources, templates from day one to general manager. The platform includes mini courses that cover the major buckets of the community manager role, from community management, operations, sales and marketing, finance, and leadership. The content is laid out in a graduated learning path, so the community manager can identify what content is most relevant to them depending on their experience and kind of jump in from there. We provide a live brand new training every single month for the community manager group. We also host a live Q&A call every single month so that the community managers can work through any challenges that they're having or opportunities, get ideas from other community managers, build their own peer network. We also have a private Slack group for the group. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go to everythingcoworking.com/community manager. And then I never remember to ask people this, but what space management platform do you use for your billing and
Office R&D?
Office R&D.
Yes, and we got that off of our
or the childcare piece.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Would you say, Amirh, that basically we had someone sort of help us kind of configure that?
Yeah, it's interesting. We just migrated to the platform in the last month or 2. So it's new to us. But I will say that it seems like it's really user-friendly in general, but related to the childcare, I think it's actually going to help us keep track of the hours a lot easier because we've been doing it manually. And so, yeah, there's a training component involved, but once we get that taken care of, I think the families are going to have a lot easier time reserving their hours and us keeping track of them.
Because prior to that, they were just telling, like verbally telling, hey, we'll be here tomorrow, or hey, we'll be here next week. And then you'd have to, go write it down. Yeah.
And then track it and make sure they come in. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to before we dig into your model, I have to mention I talk about the Google My Business listing constantly. And I did a Google My Business training for our Community Manager University, and I used yours as like the gold standard. So Amirh, I don't know if you get credit for that, but if anybody wants a good example, Pillar Coworking, we'll put the link in the show notes, but you've got your products, you have beautiful photos, 28. One of the reasons I did the training was I was noticing, like in 2020, people just completely gave up on the reviews, right? People weren't coming in, they weren't in. Everybody doesn't, nobody wants to like rock the cart and ask for reviews. And but Google's still looking for that activity. And so I thought, okay, we got to get on this and get going. And you guys have 28 and you opened in, March of 2020. So, and Amirh, you mentioned most of those are organic. You don't, necessarily.
I mean, I might prod them a little bit, but it's not like we're not running really heavy campaigns on reviews right now. It's just like asking people for help, basically.
Yeah.
Because it has been a hard year. And so I think the members of our community are really happy to help us when they can. And that's just one of the ways, right?
They want you to stay in business 100%.
And especially for childcare. I
Yeah.
think that's where it really matters a lot, because a co-working space, like, people will try it, but you're not going to try a childcare that nobody knows about, right? Like, you need
Right.
to have
You need to,
some,
social proof.
yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so that's where I think it really helps us.
Yeah.
So I also love your member profiles, and I have used those as an example also, because they're so, like the ones you do in your newsletter.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, they're
Yeah.
so simple. Amirh's
Had a
like,
variation,
member
right? She's
profile.
like, which one?
I know.
Because we've switched the like the template a few times, but essentially it's, the same
The questions are
information.
super simple, and they draw out really interesting.
Mhm.
Like the guy last month, does
Josh.
like whatever biotechy thing, and then you're like, well, what's unusual that we might not know about you? And he's like, oh, I was in an a cappella group, and you're like, oh, that's
It's so
fun.
funny. When I saw that, I was like, the next time I see Josh, I'm gonna ask him to sing me a song. I just want to hear.
Right. And so you get those like little personal things that make it easier to introduce yourself and like connect on that. It's
Yeah.
simple, but you guys are really consistent about it. So,
Thank you.
so I love that. So I know you guys have had a hard journey so far, but you're doing a lot of things right. So, okay. So let's talk about, how do you run the childcare model? What does it look like? What's the commitment from parents, part-time, full-time? How do you staff it? Give us the rundown.
Okay. So first of all, the intention, we want to be flexible and meet the needs of the community, right? And the idea is that we're supporting people that have work from home type of positions. So their work schedules tend to be pretty flexible. And so our packages are designed to be pretty flexible. We basically have 3-tier packages, and each one has a different number of hours, right? The highest tier is designed for someone that would come every day and stay from 9 to 4. That's our childcare day. It's short, relatively short compared to the business day. And that may change over time depending on the feedback we get from our members. And we've had some people say they'd like a little longer of a day, but we'll see what happens there. So that one is the full-time package. And then the middle tier, which seems to be, I think, the most popular, that one would accommodate a family that wants to come every morning from 9 to 12. So, and then the last one, it would just give you a bucket of hours that you could use, for instance, on a Friday from 9 to 4. So that's how we design them. People tend to kind of break up the hours as they need them. And that can get a little bit tricky in terms of tracking. But I think, like we were saying, the Office R&D platform does allow the parents to go in there and request a reservation. Then we get to see it and we get to approve it or, reject it, which is cool. And so then we also have a digital record of where, when families have come, which is great. So that's the way the memberships for the childcare are structured. Also, what we've done is we've included the parents co-working in the package pricing. So the families are just buying one package, which we didn't do initially, but it simplifies things, right?
Yeah.
So is it that 100% of your daycare families also work in the space, or
they have to work in the space because we don't have a childcare license?
Okay.
So to be compliant with the California Community Care Licensing Organization, parents have to stay on site. It's similar to the gym childcare
model.
business model. Well, it's the same model, right?
So you can be in the building. What happens if they want to grab lunch?
They grab lunch. But we have places like across the street. We're across the street from Whole Foods. We're across the street from a restaurant right here. Like literally, you don't even have to hit a light. You can just walk right across the street. So, so that's really the direction we take with that, is like, you have to be able to come back here in 2 minutes if we were to call you.
Right.
And we haven't had many issues. Like during the summertime, we did. And we had to reel people back in, like, no, you can't drop them off and then go get stuck in traffic and call and say you're coming back. No, you can't do that, So yeah, they have to stay on site. And I think people are respectful of it. And and eventually we may go through the licensing process, and then we would, be more of a full service childcare. But to be honest, right now, it is nice to not have to worry about the licensing things that you have to comply with, though we do run it based on the licensing guidelines and standards. Before we started, we were working with one of my professors from DVC, and she's an early childhood educator, and she helped us to design the space and the program to make sure that things were in line with their standards. So all of that is considered as we run it, because we want to run a high quality program. It's just that we don't, licensing doesn't come here and check on us. We just check on ourselves.
Right.
Yeah. What age are the children that are able to use the childcare?
Right now, they're 2 to 5 or 6.
Okay.
And so we have had some people requesting for younger ones, but right now we just want to stabilize this program for the toddler preschoolers, and then we'll eventually bring infants on, probably just a small group, because the childcare space is small. So
In comparison to other, childcare spaces.
Full-size daycare, like dedicated daycares.
Right.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have 2 separate spaces for the infants and the toddler preschoolers. I mean, we can separate the space, but it's not like separate classrooms.
So would it simplify the business to just require everyone to be full-time?
It would.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It would.
But you feel strongly enough that you want to support the sort of more ad hoc sort of drop-in memberships?
You know what? Honestly, I think we might have to move in that direction, but I think it's going to become like, it's a matter of demand, right? So right now, or for the past year, we couldn't feasibly turn away a family that says, I want to come every morning from 9 to 12, right? Even though it is not easy for us to manage, right, administratively. But I think as time goes on, like we have full-time students starting in January. And so as those full-time students start, we'll have less spaces available for that flex spaces. And so as that happens, we'll probably have to say to people, this space will be given priority to somebody that wants a full-time slot.
Yeah.
Which was initially how we had created it, right? Amirh, I'm saying like with the full-time packages was that they always get precedence over anyone else who's coming in, for a drop-in rate or for less time. So yeah.
I think from a model perspective, you talked before we started recording about just lining up staffing, right? With, you have to commit to that full-time staff. And so when you have members that aren't committing to full-time daycare, I think a lot of folks get passionate about supporting the families that don't want full-time. And it's so hard to execute because of that lineup.
Agreed.
Well, it's kind of like the 80-20 idea, right? Like we really have to focus, or ideally in the future, like we're talking about, the full-time students will sort of be the ones who are kind of carrying it. And then we don't really have to worry about, the ones who can't make that commitment. Not to say that we wouldn't support them, but just maybe we're reeling back some of those offerings, and it's not as a free for all in terms of choices.
What advice would you give to someone who has it in their head that they want to do the drop-in and that they would somehow manage caregivers to match up with ad hoc demand?
Not drop-in. No,
right.
Definitely. So it's funny because I was kind of thinking about drop-in, because initially we were imagining we would accommodate drop-in people as well, right? But then COVID happened. So we never went down that road. So really, we never accepted drop-ins. Like, I just need to come in for a couple hours. You have to be a member at this point. And that's because of COVID. So fortunately, we have that, that we learned that lesson, I think, the easy way, because to your point, trying to accommodate on-demand childcare without having a consistent group or schedule for your staff is really challenging. And especially like the gym can do it, because the gym, I think they just pull out their they just pull out gym
They
employees.
sort of multitask their people.
Yeah,
right?
they're not early childhood educators. They don't have a background in childhood. You know what I mean?
And there's no
Just keep
expectation.
alive while you work out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And so we're not doing that here. Like, these people are educated, they're passionate, they're like, this is what they're doing for their career. And so when you have that level like of quality in your staff, you have to be able to give them work and like in a consistent manner, or else you'll lose them to someone that can.
Yeah.
So that's a tricky thing. But it's interesting because I would say in the past 2 months, I guess things are just, the landscape related to COVID is getting better. People are probably just so burnt out that they're like, I have to figure something else out. And so we've seen a lot more families that are like, I want to give this a try. And what happens a lot of times is someone may start with like less hours, and then they'll want to add more, they'll increase their packages. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 6 months in the childcare, because it's just progressed so much in the past 6 months.
Yeah. But it's tricky too, because like our progression, I don't even know if we can really, like, what would be the baseline for our progression, right? Knowing where we started, the trajectory is definitely going in the right direction, but not at the speed that, we as business owners would want.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay, can we like speed this up a little bit? But I mean, yeah, it's definitely a waiting game. And we've been saying like so much of it is contingent on human behavior. Like, we can do what we can do on our parts to make sure that, you're safe and that our space is safe, and that we're taking all the necessary precautions, but really it boils down to, are people ready? And, hopefully, like Amirh said, people will get to that point where they're like, okay, I actually need to leave my house and get out there.
I think California is even, we talk to people from all over the country, because we're still masks indoors, and, there are other places with those requirements in place, but lots of places that don't. And it's different, right? Especially when you have open space to go. I went to a space Monday, and yeah, you sit in the space with your mask on and, take it off to drink coffee or whatever, but it was pretty quiet, because I think, yeah, people just aren't kind of coming out in full force yet. And to your point, it's just a timing thing. It's, yeah, challenging. But your offices are full.
They are not.
No, they're not. Okay.
No, they're not. That's been one of, I'd say, the sort of continual challenges. Would you agree, Amirh, about, our offices? I think in the beginning, like literally in the beginning, when you asked if we had any members during the shelter in place, like we had maybe 2 or 3. It was worth it to them to stay for a few months.
Yeah.
But I would say
they were private office members though. So
yeah. Is that what you're talking about, Jamie? The private office members? Yeah. It's been challenging recently. And I think too, just like spending habits. We know that, Americans at one point had like the highest rate of savings in history when things were completely closed. And then as they started to open, people are deciding how they want to spend that money. And for some folks, an office is not really a priority. It's like, well, I can do it at my kitchen table just fine. And keep that stash, especially if they're not being compensated by their companies. So it's that one's been tricky. I'm just trying to show people that there's value in a private office, although it is, it's a large investment for some. But yeah, that one has been hard.
That will come, I hope, because that across the board we've seen. Are they small offices, or are they team offices?
2 are 4. We could fit up to 4. And then the other one is an efficiency office that actually is occupied, but the other 3 are like 1 to 2. So small teams.
Okay. Yeah. I think the 3 to 4, right, is a timing piece, because folks are waiting to kind of do the office share. So yeah, you'll get there on those. So can folks join the co-working side without doing childcare?
Yes.
Okay. So you can have members co-working
Yes.
members that don't have kids. So what does your membership look like? Like what's your typical member?
Well, it's interesting because in the mornings, that's the busiest time, and that's when the parents and the children are here.
Yeah.
So a lot of our members currently are parents, and we'll actually have like the husband and wife, they'll switch off. Like one day mom brings the child, next day dad does. So, and I think those people, they have all kinds of jobs. They may be entrepreneurs, they may just be corporate employees, but they need the space and the childcare. Right. And then we have some startups that are here. One of our startups, like Christina mentioned, they're just really doing really well. We have a couple of startups, and then we have just people that are like small businesses or employees, corporate employees. Yeah.
Kind of a mix.
Yeah.
I would say too, would you say, I mean, they're hyper, like they're local. Most of
Yes.
a majority of them, like if they wanted to, they could probably walk, but I don't think anybody is really driving more than 10 minutes in their car, just based on what I know from the folks.
Well, actually, some of the families are. The families will
some of
come
the
from
families.
further. We do have that further out, but I think it's, they're just doing it because they need the help, and they like the childcare. But I was going to ask you, Jamie, do you find that suburban spaces have a harder time filling offices, or like more expensive products, getting those sold?
So I would say it depends. I suspect your challenge is this office size. I mean, everyone will tell you they're sold out of like one person offices all day long, and then the middle, sort of 3 to 4, people just aren't doing that yet. In California and other places, they're starting to come back. So I think that's kind of the challenge. It seems to me that the trend is people are even selling like team suites, because companies are starting to make decisions about, okay, we're going to provide space, but we're going to have some sort of rotational schedule. And then, the people at home who are like, I cannot, be home with my spouse and my kid anymore, are leaving the house. But it's the small, you mentioned like the efficiency or micro office, like gone. All of those are gone. So it's the middle ones that are harder. But to your point, right. And I don't know Lafayette well. People may have offices at home, right? Like in more urban areas, nobody, has an office. Like even where we live in Burlingame, houses are smaller, lots are smaller. We had to turn our guest room into an office, and I feel very claustrophobic being at home yesterday, my daughter was home, and I was just like, oh my God, I can't, it just makes me insane. But people, people have different sort of tipping points, when they have bigger houses, or maybe there's one spouse that's going to work. And so, they're okay at home. But yes, have faith. People are filling their offices, but the bigger offices are taking time. But it's always a trade-off, right? Because I help new people who are starting spaces, and like one approach would be to do lots of micro offices, but you did construction, like every office with like, its own HVAC and its own sprinkler, and it's expensive to do those smaller offices. So it's like this trade-off of how to balance what your offering is.
We did just recently though, incorporate sort of a hybrid package.
What's so funny? I had seen that somewhere, and I went back to try to find it because I thought it was brilliant, and then I couldn't find it again. So I wanted to ask you about it.
It was in the newsletter.
Okay.
And it was a link in the newsletter.
Okay.
And it pops up on the website too. You may have seen it.
Oh, I bet it was the website pop up. Yeah. Okay.
It's interesting because I think those price points are definitely more in line with what people are willing to pay, especially if they don't know if they're really ready to full on commit to, even a 2 to 3 person occupancy, like one of those offices. That price point is like, it's a happy medium. But to your point, it doesn't really cut into what we thought in terms of projections that we would be able to make off of that office when we move forward with the construction, and, said, okay, well then this will be our ROI if we add these offices here.
They need to be full.
Yeah.
So tell me about the hybrid offering. What does that look like?
So basically it's one of them is like our community member. So our community member is 5 days, any days that you want out of the month for $99. The hybrid flex is sort of the next step of that. If you find yourself needing more time with an actual door, then you can't get that in our phone booths. Then you get pretty much a bucket of hours that you decide how you want to use it in a private office. And I guess like the caveat, which is not really a caveat, but that we tell people is if, if someone comes in and they want to lease this office,
right,
you're out. Might be in a different office the next time,
yeah.
But you still get a door, for a few $100s more than what you would have paid being in the space only 5 times a month. So it gives people, going back to that idea of flexibility. It gives people options. And I think for them, they probably feel good about like, okay, I'm in here, I have a closed door, I can take this meeting in a professional space. That's again, not my kitchen.
Yep.
And it feels worth it to them.
So I would buy that package all day long. I think it is such a good fit, but I wonder if it takes time to kind of build the demand for that, because you have to teach people that that's an option and what that looks like. Cause I think it's such a great option. Yeah, I was in a co-working space on Monday and I kept like every like half hour I'd walk by the phone booth to see like, okay, is it full? Can I take a call? And then they only have 2 meeting rooms, which you have to book, and they're big meeting rooms. And we talk a lot about this insight that people feel funny just taking like a Zoom call in a meeting room. Right? It's this weird,
like this whole executive boardroom,
right?
For a Zoom call,
but they love the office, the ability to pop in and use an office, but not be committed to it. And the 1-person office in the space I was in on Monday in downtown San Mateo was $2,000 a month. So for a 1-person office,
the office,
maybe $2,000 a month. Yeah. And to your point, I was like, okay, totally out of my budget. No, thanks. So the hybrid option, like I just want access to a place with a door. Yeah. I don't need it all the time, and I'm not willing to pay for it all the time at that rate. Yeah.
And like you said, I think that's the challenging part. Like we have these plans now established, we can execute them. Office R&D actually helps us facilitate the, signing up with the spaces for people can do it on their own. But you got to remember to let people know, right? Like when they come in and they see the space and they're saying, I want this or that, you got to promote it. And so just constantly promoting this and just getting the word out so that people catch on to it. I think that's the tricky part.
Yeah. Where do most of your leads come from? How do people find you?
I would say our paid ads. I mean, aside from word of mouth, because that's really, and that's what I was going to say, like Lafayette it's hyper local, like it's very much a Cheers vibe, like Q, where everybody knows your name, like that sort of song. That's very much the ethos of the city. And so a lot of it is word of mouth, but definitely, our Facebook, Google ads for people who don't want to go through the tunnel to Oakland or to Berkeley or to San Francisco. And then, you go the opposite direction and you're going past Walnut Creek. I think we're sort of a happy medium for that to kind of cut into commute times.
Yeah.
So the paid ads have been great with that.
Do you run the ads yourself or do you outsource those?
So we've done a bit of both, right? Amirh, you were kind of handling those for a minute and then we hired someone to take them over. And now we're actually in the process of getting someone else to even do a deeper dive than what we had with our current marketing.
She knows him, Ruben.
Oh, you
faithfully.
That's so funny. Yes, lots of people work with Ruben. And I'm glad you're doing paid ads because I think it's probably timing on those offices. But yeah, I mean, it's always like, it feels painful. I'm sure you guys came out in 2020 and you're not swimming in cash and now you need to invest in marketing. But right. run a couple of programs, and I have several folks that use Rubin, and they're the most relaxed on the calls.
Oh.
Although, again, I think it depends on there. I have one guy in Roseville, and he's like full. His offices are full, and he's the one that introduced me to Rubin, actually. And then a woman outside of Virginia, and she is also full. But so, hang in there, it'll happen. But I think, yeah, running ads is good because that's how search active searchers. Yeah. They're looking on Google and you've tested Facebook ads as well.
Yes, we use Facebook
Mhm.
ads too.
Mhm.
I think Facebook has given us a lot of visibility in the local community. But also like the organizations within the community have been very supportive in helping us get the word out too, like the Chamber
Mhm.
of Lafayette. We also are partners with the Lafayette Partners in Education, which is, they're connected to all of the schools in the area. We're working with them and they're like helping us do cross marketing. And parent groups, we're trying to, work closely with the groups that are just affiliated with the children in the area, because that's where it's at for us, right?
Yeah.
Like bringing in parents and because it's a new concept in this community, I think the level of excitement that people have when they visit or they see the space or their friends tell them, it's high. So word of mouth is also really big for us.
So how do you two divide and conquer in the business? What are your roles and what
Look
are your
at that. My deep breath. No. Amirh, do you want to speak to that? Or you want me to tackle that one?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I'll try. I think initially, and this goes back to just forming a partnership. If you've never run a business, right? Adding a partner is just adding another level of learning with a really, high learning curve around how to configure those things. So in the beginning, I think we thought that it was going to be very 50-50 in all the respects. But I think what we're finding is I tend to not be on site as much as Amirh, like not nearly as much as Amirh. And we're kind of at a place where we're figuring out like how does that work, best for both of us, but also for the business. And then even in terms of hiring, like just figuring out like, okay, if there are gaps in presence, how does this community manager fill those gaps? Like, how does this person that we're bringing on as a part of the team, kind of take a little more off of your plate? Because like she's mentioned earlier, she has on her lovely Pillar Kids, apron, because we're in the process of, hiring a new childcare lead. And so she's had to step into that role. And so, we have a temporary community manager, but who still needs direction. So I would say like we're at a place right now where we're recognizing like, okay, we really need to it's almost like a new start in a sense, where we're just, with more business, we're realizing like how we need to really firm up what each other's responsibilities are, and just be realistic about it.
Yeah, I think that's part of where we underestimated what it would take to run this business, because for the childcare, essentially you need to have a director, someone that's directing the program at all times, and then you need to have staff in the classroom with the children. And we didn't understand that. So, that would be my piece of advice to anyone that was interested in creating something similar, is like, don't underestimate the level of staffing, and just like making sure that you have somebody overseeing it all from the childcare side, and then also someone in the space executing it with the children hands-on every day, because it's hard to have that be the same person.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the co-working space is its own,
kind of has the similar requirements, right? Somebody has
Yes.
to thinking, working
Yes.
on it, and then somebody has to be working in it.
Yes.
So now you sort of have that, on both sides with
Yes.
you, and you two have other kids and family.
Yes.
And yes,
Yeah,
lots
life,
of demands
right?
on your time. Yeah.
Jamie, quick question though, like if you could compare like our space to some of the other spaces that you're familiar with, what percentage of them would you say the founders or the owners are working at the space?
I think it's a pretty strong mix. I think it really depends on a little bit on the personality of the owner. Their other commitments. I think some owners sort of create the space because they actually like the idea of the community manager role, right? They want to build the space and they want to be the person.
Right.
So doing both totally works for them.
Right.
And then you get people who the community manager role is unique, right? It's exhausting. It's very on. You have people in the space and you guys have been kind of building up, but right, if you are not used to it and you go right, sort of work the front. I used to like be so exhausted. If I had to fill in, I would be like ready to sleep under my desk at the end of the day. Because it's
going in for my afternoon shift in like 30 minutes and
okay. And it's a lot of detail, right? Yeah. So I don't know if you've read the book Traction.
No.
So Traction would be great for you to read, or any partnership, because you should figure out sort of in your business which role you are. Traction talks about like usually there's a visionary who's just like big picture, sees what's next. And then there's an implementer who would look more like a VP of operations and is like, okay, this is how we're going to actually execute. And so the visionaries don't do well with the details, right? Running a space, co-working or childcare is so many details, and it can be really hard. I am definitely that personality, like to stay in the details is really hard for me. So I could never work in the space all the time. But some people that really, they thrive in that role and they're happy to do it, or maybe they run a coaching business and they do it from the space, or, they just can do it. Or
I was just curious, but that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
I think too, it depends on the size of the space. You guys are kind of in between. As you have bigger spaces, the economics of having staff get easier, right? So, and more members, you'll get that. I mean, you're really still climbing you're really just starting.
Yes. We're really just starting.
Yeah.
Yes. That's exactly what it feels like.
How long is your lease on the bank?
5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. You did an amazing job. So if you were to start over, what changes would you make?
Oh my goodness.
You mean like in a new space?
Yeah. Or say somebody came up and, said, I want to sit down and have coffee with you too. What would you tell them? What are some things that you would advise them on? Not that you did, wrong or right, just now that you sort of know a little bit about what what would you say?
I already know, like off top, I would say, if you don't own the building, like don't overinvest in it. I think that was our first.
Yes.
Error.
I was saying money.
I don't know what else to call it, but error, because that put us in a position where we began off like in a hole where we didn't even imagine. And because we were new to commercial real estate, we had no idea when we walked into this space what it would take to bring it to business, right? To market, what that would really cost us. And so that would be the first thing I would say, like really know what you're getting into when you do tenant improvement projects. If you're going to invest in a space that you don't own, like make sure there's a cap on what you're going to put into that. And then like, I know you keep talking about the management agreements, and that sounds super interesting, like exploring your options around those things before getting into a lease for a space, I think would be like one of the things that I would want to do in the future.
I think following up on that, making sure that not only do the projections actually line up with your investment, but being realistic around what you think your return is, or like, what is it that you're looking to get out of the actual investment? Is it that you want the actual return, or is it that you want to create something that's going to have, longevity, that will put you in a position to have more, like just being really clear around, what is the goal? Like I think, as a partnership also, but for yourself personally, Because if you can't define that going into a partnership or going into opening a business, then it's like, okay, you're kind of just out there. But yeah, definitely the money part. Know what's your, your hard stop number, and what's feasible for you.
It's hard though, right? Because you get emotional about what you're trying to create and you see it, especially once you have drawings and, it's become real. And then you get into it and to Amir's point, it starts to get bigger than you want it to, and it's hard to turn back. Yeah. Anything else you would tell folks getting started on that journey?
I'm trying to think. I think if there's a way to really, and I feel like you touched on this before, Jamie, so I'm not saying anything new, but investing in creating your community before you actually have the space to make sure, 150% sure that there is a demand for what you're, potentially going to create. So, whether if it's a maker space that you're trying to do, or, whatever this, community that you're trying to build that eventually will be in a physical space, I would say really investing time into that and creating that, community of people, so that when your space is done, it's just like, okay, well, now our space is open and here we go. Yeah. And that would have taken more time. It's funny when I think about it, I don't know that that really would have changed how we were doing things, but it's still something enough to know. Yeah. I mean, I think
it would have. I think it would have for sure, to build up that following beforehand.
No, yeah. I'm just saying, I don't think you or I even were thinking about that prior to this project.
Oh yeah, no, we did.
But moving forward, that would definitely be.
But I will say, I think we did hear the podcast on it before we started, and we
right, and then
like there's so many things.
So many things. Yes. Yeah, so I do talk about that. It's a common challenge. There's so many things when you're managing construction and you're trying to do the basics at the same time. And that's even after you've made all those decisions, because even before that, right, you're excited entrepreneur who wants to just like go. And so slowing down and also it's not always as feasible. I mean, you want to try to validate demand, but it's not like probably you would have gotten folks to sign up so far in advance for a childcare space, right? They want to see it, they want to feel it.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do things like renderings and you can try to really help people visualize what it's going to be to get that commitment, or build a wait list. I mean, there are things you can do, but
sure. And I mean, are you familiar with the spaces in SoCal that are doing it, like Brella or Big and Tiny workspaces? Okay, yeah. So there are spaces in Southern California that are creating this model. And I don't know why it's not happening in the Bay Area yet, but, and they're opening additional locations, and you'll see them like put out their teaser, and say, hey, we're coming to this location, down the line. And I think because they've had that following from their first space and people are talking about them, it's a lot easier, right? Like then when no one knows who you are and you come out the gates and you're like, hey, there's this, and I see both of these things happening. Some are new businesses that are trying to get it started, and then some are established and they're just continuing the excitement and spreading it into new locations. So I think, it's important. But to your point, I think when you're new and no one knows who you are, it's harder to do.
It's harder to do. What is the name of the first one that you mentioned?
Brella. Brella.
So I saw someone brought one to my attention.
Aren't those in, I think they're in predominantly shopping centers, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I saw that and I thought, oh, that's so interesting, because they were doing like after hours babysitting. They had a lot of offering. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because mom and dad could go in and go see a movie or have dinner.
Right.
drop the kids. And
Yeah.
so my other theory on that brand is that the Westfield. I suspect they have a management agreement in their
100%.
locations because, right. So the malls are saying, how can we get people here? Oh, let's have a
And
place
make them shop.
right, and make them
Yes.
shop.
Yes.
So it's super smart. So I don't know who's behind that, but I'd seen it and I thought, right, they are not doing their own build out. They've got they've got a lot of things they're wrapping into that, which, yeah, there's a lot of, I think this is a hard, okay, so they have tons of, goodness, wow. They have a big team.
Yes, that's the other
somebody raised money and yeah.
So they got funding and after they got the funding, I think it just took them to the next level, right? And I think that's the other thing, like we're just the two of us at this point. And so that kind of changes the game as well. Once, you're able to accomplish that, then you just, possibilities become a lot larger. But I think it's a trend that we're going to see more of, right? There is going to be more people trying it. I think what we're going to see too is established childcare providers like the Bright Horizons or like larger companies that are just going to go in and partner with other, space operators, even if it's not corporation, like a specific corporation, but, just start partnering with them to create this type of situation. So because it's valuable, it's invaluable. And that's one of the things I think we all learned during COVID. It's like, if you don't have someone helping you with your children,
good luck.
They're small, like you can't do anything as a parent. You're not getting anything done.
We have 4-year-olds. So.
Oh gosh. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You both have 4-year-olds.
Yeah. We were pregnant at the same time. You left that out of your story.
Yes. Yeah. We did. We
were figuring it out. We were both pregnant at the same time. So
yeah,
maybe blame it on the pregnancy for our crazy decision.
So you opened your space when they were whatever, 1 or
1.
Yes.
2 or yeah.
God, yeah. Madness.
Yeah. So, my son has grown up here. He's been coming here for a long time. So yeah.
That's right. So that you're kind of realizing your dream. Well, and you're also in a point where you're still so new. I guarantee you that these folks who raised all that money had a time period that you're having where they're like so in the business, right? You're so in it because you have to work the front, right? You've got your front desk shift coming up.
Yes. It's like, what time is it? I think.
Right. We probably need to wrap this up. And so it's hard to think, right? You don't have the thinking space to figure out, what to do next. And you still have 4-year-olds at home and or at the space.
Yes.
So yeah. But everybody goes through these growing pains. It's totally normal. The umbrella people went through that as well.
Thank you, JD.
Came out of it. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
And fundraised and got a very fancy website. So, ladies, it was so wonderful to connect. What does the rest of the year look like for the business? What are your goals?
I think our goals are just to continue to increase our visibility, increase our occupancy, hope that we can see some really stable trends that will kind of infer how we should be approaching, the next 2 years of our lease. Because like that's sort of the, if there is any hard stop, it will be that because it's not our building. But yeah, I think just continuing to do what we're doing and more. And keep learning, Amirh.
Yeah, same thing. Same. Just keep growing in the community.
Yeah. Ladies, thank you for taking time away from, I know, busy schedules to do this and tell your story. I guarantee you there are many, many listeners. I can't tell you how many people come into my program or our podcast listeners that have similar goals. So they ate up every single word of your story. So we have all of your contact where you live on the internet in the show notes, your Facebook, Instagram, website. So if you are looking for that, you can find that on the website. So thank you both. It was wonderful to hear your story.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. And
This
if
is so
anybody's in the
cool.
Lafayette area, come on by.
I know.
And
I still
Jamie,
need
you
come
have
up
to
for my
come.
tour. I know.
I know,
You
right?
gotta get up here.
I
43
know.
minutes. It's not that far. Just come in the middle of the day.
Grab a coffee.
Exactly. I need to come for lunch. That's exactly
Yes.
what
And
I
then
need.
leave before 3.
Right.
Like,
At least.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again. This was awesome.
Yes, thank you.
Nice.